Here's our panelists today. Behnaz Rouhani is the AMATYC Professional Development Coordinator. We've got Christine Mirbaha. She's the AMATYC Division and Department Leadership ANET Leader. We've got Linda Brady, who is the president of Dallas College, Brookhaven. And myself, Laura Watkins, I'm the AMATYC President-elect. So we'd like you to join us today in a conversation about what we've observed over the last year or so. So as we end the year of teaching in a pandemic, we have seen teaching and learning mathematics in the first 2 years of college undergo some pretty significant changes. Now that we are entering the second year of teaching with COVID, and COVID is still spreading significantly in some areas of the country, but vaccinations are becoming more widely available and some regions of the country are starting to open up. We're going to reflect on where we've been, where we are, and in what direction we might want to head. So let's start by discussing what challenges to providing an equitable learning experience surfaced as a result of the pandemic. What strategies helped to minimize those challenges and what might be helpful in the future? Christine, let's go ahead and start with you, then have Linda chime in and followed by Behnaz.
Okay. Of course, from the faculty perspective, of course, there was a lot of challenges. There were trying to make sure that the coursework and everything else was still as challenging or whatever, but also being cognizant of the fact that there was a lot of differences going on. And from a department chairperson or that type of a title, coordinator or assistant dean or dean position, that was basically looking at, how are they going to get the logistics of having all the faculty members trained or at least well-versed enough in the virtual environment so that they would be able to teach effectively. There was, and also because there are things that happen for the students, for example, they had to deal with not necessarily having enough Wi-Fi exposure or a good solid internet exposure. Also, some of them didn't have computers. Some of them didn't have access really to books unless the books were given electronically by the publisher. So there were a lot of different aspects involved in that. And so the big thing, though, was that faculty also didn't have access to some of the internet, or they didn't have computers. We had to get computers to them as well, and computers where they could teach right on the screen, or and actually definitely have video and speaker at all times, so that a microphone, so that they could do all of their teaching. We also had to be cognizant of the fact that everybody had, not everybody, but a lot of people had to become trained in using the internet at all. Several faculty especially did not know how to do it. And the assumption that students could use it because they are young and they've been raised with the computers, we found that that wasn't necessarily the case. We also found out that there was a lot of things that happened as a result. So strategies that we used, well, we provided computers. We took money out of different budgets and put it together so that we could have all this. We had Wi-Fi out on the parking lot just in case someone needed it. Faculty ended up being a lot more flexible in terms of how they were administering assessments, and they were a little bit more attentive to what their students' needs were, a bit more flexible about the deadlines and some of the requirements for the course, without compromising any kind of rigor or quality of education. And that was a real challenge to rise to. There were times when people did have to help out, take over, team teach, whatever. Just to help out a little bit more. And also the students who didn't have enough resources. One of the resources that we found was really tough for everybody was finding a private or quiet space where they could study, where they could talk. Okay, and then of course there's a multitude of meetings because everybody's going to have meetings because now you're not commuting back and forth. Everybody can just be there. And so the assumption was that there was going to be availability by people a lot more than was. So it was a question of trying to curb that a little bit. And so some of this has really been great for as we've progressed more, because we've learned how now, we've everybody has learned how to deal with working on the internet, working in Zoom or working in Teams, or there's a Google place too. So there's lots of different places where people have learned how to work or learn how to study from. There are still a lot of challenges involved, but moving forward, these pieces are all going to be there.
Linda?
Thanks. Yeah, so Christine, those are all really great points. You were talking about the students not having access to technology or reliable internet. We did what you did. We ordered some laptops and some hotspots immediately in March, as soon as things, shut down because of COVID, and we could not get our laptops in until July. So there was a shortage from the manufacturers, right, from the tech companies. And so that was a real problem. We sort of cannibalized some of our labs that had, carts with laptops and loaned them out, but it wasn't the amount that we needed. So that was a real problem. In addition to what you mentioned about students having access to reliable internet. And so I think looking into the future, I'm really advocating for city, state, federal intervention for infrastructure for broadband internet, because it's very obvious that there are differences in Dallas County. North Dallas is very well equipped, South Dallas is not, and it's an equity issue. So that's a long-term problem that we really need to tackle, because even if we aren't operating remotely, right, there are still issues that students need to be able to access the internet for whatever research and various things. And if it's more convenient for them to take online classes, right, but they may not have that access. So it really is about equity. As far as student support, in addition to what the faculty could provide themselves, we eventually were able to open up our libraries and some limited in-person tutoring services by appointment, within the COVID guidelines and all of that. We did that as quickly as we could, but it definitely was limited. And Christine mentioned faculty professional development and support. So we had about half of our faculty who had never taught online before. And of course, there was this mad scramble in March, right? That, oh my gosh, we've got to get our classes online in a week or 2 weeks at the most. And so we extended spring break a week, like many of you probably did, to give faculty another week. But we really depended a lot on faculty mentoring, faculty who had taught online before, really stepping up and helping their colleagues who had not taught online before. And our professional staff that support professional development and instructional designers and that sort of thing, they put up in our on our website professional development videos and offered one-on-one support to faculty as needed, including our adjuncts. But then longer term, we contracted with an organization called AQ. It's the Association of College and University Educators. They do professional development for faculty for Southern New Hampshire University, which is online. And so they have a really high quality professional development program that they offer online. It's a 6-week course for faculty. So our faculty did it last summer, and I think we got 160 faculty through that course last summer, and then we've continued in the fall and the spring. And so it was really about high quality learning experiences online. So, we kind of slammed things online for March, but then we wanted to make sure that faculty were learning the best practices for online education. It's a different medium from teaching face-to-face, obviously. So when historically, when we as a nation, as the world went from radio to television, my understanding is that the radio producers just took what they were doing on radio, put it on television, and it failed miserably because it was a different medium. And so I know some of us were thinking, well, we'll just lecture over Zoom, right? We'll just do what we were doing in class and do it over Zoom. Well, it turns out that's not as effective as when you're face to face. And so there are other things that you can do that are different that really do work better in a virtual environment. So we wanted to make sure that our faculty had all the tools possible and all the knowledge possible to help with that. Okay, so that's enough. I'll pass it to Behnaz.
Thank you, Christine and Linda. You all brought up such wonderful points. Now, I'll be talking as a professional development on that, from that perspective. What I feel is that we need to address the technology gap and other inequities that distance learning is shining a spotlight on. And inequities have been exposed during the past year. Of course, both Linda and Christine, they referenced about students' lack of access to technology. Our school did the same thing, providing laptops and hotspots and all that. The other thing that I want, and of course, the other point is I want to mention is that students were abruptly asked to leave their dorms, leave the campuses. So they didn't know when they're coming back. So they left their textbooks, everything there, and they didn't know when they'll be coming back. So they ended up, those who had books, they were able to refer to their books, those who didn't. So now there is this talk of OER. Just imagine if we had embraced OER, how much our lives would have been easier. So that was the other point. They didn't even have textbook to refer to. The other point was about the faculty access to PD. And unfortunately, before the pandemic, only privileged few who were able to attend conferences, whose schools were willing or able to pay for their conference fees, they were able to attend conferences. Others, they were just begging the institute, the organizers of the conferences, please, can you do this online? We would love to attend, but our schools cannot fund us. But this pandemic, this past year, just gave us a blink of how it is possible, how organizations can provide PDs and how enjoyable it can be. So therefore, not only the privileged few were able to attend, but everyone around the nation had the opportunity to attend the conferences at a reduced fee, and some of them were even free of charge, which was phenomenal. So I do hope as a PD coordinator that we can bear that in mind going forward. The other point I want to mention is that most faculty development opportunities are focused on full-time faculty. And we are neglecting those who teach many of our students, and those are part-time faculty. How many times when funds are dispersed, departments, they ask part-time faculty, we would like to offer you this for your great work to attend such and such a conference. They have to pay out of pocket. Now, finding ways to engage part-time faculty can be challenging, and engaging adjuncts in faculty development opportunities not only creates a sense of belonging and improved teaching, but ultimately changes lives. And I do hope that going forward, we can bring them to the table, brainstorm with them, and provide opportunities for them to attend a conferences. I think I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. So leading up to our next question, as mathematics faculty, we are often challenged, or we are often seeking ways to improve our craft, whether it be learning about new ways to engage students in mathematics classroom or new strategies for teaching mathematics concepts. And often, as Behnaz was alluding to, we rely on professional development to help us do that. So how has how we think about professional development changed as a result of the pandemic? And it might be helpful to think about where we were and where we are headed. And Banaz, let's have you take the lead on this one, and then Christine and Linda.
Great. The pandemic certainly moved institutions of higher education to suddenly online learning, and the sudden transition to online learning exposed a systemic gap in faculty preparations, which it was alluded to. That is a lack of comprehensive training for online learning for all instructors. And accomplishments that once seemed like stretch goals are now totally under our belts. Faculty are more fluent than ever at using their learning management systems. They have become familiar with the common video conferencing applications, and many have also mastered extended video conferencing features such as polling and breakout rooms. And a good number are even experimenting with courseware and collaborative online annotation tools, which is awesome. Now, I have a few thoughts about where we are headed. The first one is about blended learning, that I believe they will dramatically increase. Now, necessity of teaching and learning with asynchronous platforms like Canvas, Blackboard, D2L, and synchronous platforms like Zoom, WebEx, so on, will yield significant benefits when these methods are layered into face-to-face instruction. We will come back from COVID with a much more widely shared understanding that digital tools are complements, and I repeat, complements and not substitutes for intimacy and immediacy of face-to-face learning. The next point is that online education will be a strategic priority at every institution. Now, very few colleges and universities were doing absolutely nothing with online education pre-COVID. In fact, it was a no-no kind of thing. And there was wide variation, however, in the degree to which online education was central to an institution's strategic planning. Now, this will all change after COVID. In the future, every president, provost, dean, and trustee will understand that online education is not only a potential source for new revenues. Instead, online education will be recognized as core to every school's plan for institutional resilience and academic continuity. Now, the post-pandemic understanding will change how schools plan for and manage and fund online education. Before, some schools were not. In fact, they were not even hiring online faculty. The third one is that it's about existing and potential partnerships will be rethought. Now, if there is one big thing that COVID-19 has taught us, it is that it's a mistake to outsource core educational capabilities. Schools that invested in their learning design resources by both hiring instructional designers and by reorganizing campus learning organizations into integrated units were able to manage relatively efficiently the transition to COVID-19 required remote teaching and learning. And we suspect that those schools that were dependent on online program management providers to run online programs, they had a harder time in making this transition. Although in all fairness, the research to support or contradict this hypothesis is not yet done. So it's just out there. The other point is that, which is my final point, is that since many colleges and universities already offer substantial proportion of their classes and degrees, especially degrees online, they will seek digital pedagogy skills in new faculty. So if you are considering a tenure track career, you have already gotten a taste of what your future institution may need. And I leave it at that.
Wow, thank you, Banaz. I agree. Yes, there's a lot that professional development, at least in terms of technology, is really going to expand and needed to expand very quickly, which is really kind of, it's amazing what we were able to do. I do want to talk about a little bit about at our school or at our college, we have people who are already, we have a big online learning already. And so one of the things that we had come available to us a lot more was the people who are really tech savvy in terms of how to do things, and were the trainers actually got to the point where they could do instantaneous videos. In other words, if someone said that I have a problem, and here, this is, they would send them a little video, very short video on this is how to fix, this is how to do this. This is what you might want to try, and acting as resources. And as we all grew, we grew to learn more and more and help each other, as was said earlier. So that's one of the things that's really been great, because most of us who are in charge of things like certain committees like courses and things like that, we really do need to be able to work with our full-time and our adjunct faculty members to help them more. And I think going forward, that's going to continue and continue to escalate. I think there's going to be a lot more actually dependence on real-time. Here's a short how-to. And also we had at our college, we also had extensive training, even for people who were seasoned in teaching in the online environment, who had gone through extensive training already over the years, but still to have something to help, especially with the pedagogy, because of course it does change. But one of the things that that has emerged that I think that COVID actually, excuse me, put to the forefront is accessibility issues. Accessibility for people who need, for example, JAWS or something like that to read, or need Kurzweil in order for their to get their tests and things like that. So there was a learning curve for people who really had to rely on themselves to provide these for our students. They had to provide it, they just send them to some sort of a student services part, and they would take care of it always. Well, now the responsibility became ours. And that was a huge piece that I think is still evolving because of the new accessibility rules and everything else, taking even the OERs that we create have to be totally accessible at this point, and videos and things like that. So even providing videos for our students, videos of our lessons and things like that, they all have to be fully accessible as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of room for professional development to take care of situations like that are not only not going to go away, but they're going to accelerate in the future. Because of course, yes, you're right, the colleges are going to continue to have both face-to-face, well, all three, face-to-face, and then virtual, what we call remote class, which is synchronous class, but in the online environment, and then the totally online classes. Linda, how's things on that perspective?
Yeah, well, I think what Banaz said earlier about the great aspect of professional development now being offered virtually, conferences, we weren't having to travel. And while I love traveling itself, and I love going to conferences and seeing people in person, I really hate to pack and unpack. So that's been nice that I didn't have to do that. But I am sort of like, okay, I'm over that now. I'm ready to go somewhere and see people in person. So so I think the great part of having this online delivered virtually so that we don't have to go anywhere, there's also the flip side, that what I've noticed about myself is that there are distractions, right? So if I go to a conference, I'm there, I'm at the convention center, I'm going to sessions and all that. If I'm home or if I'm in my office, it's, easier to be distracted by email, or someone knocks on my door, or if I'm at home, I need to go throw those clothes in the dryer, right? Like all those random things. So there are distractions, even if we're in our offices. I think it's not the same as being in person, not just from the networking perspective, but I think it takes more of an effort to focus on engaging in it. It has for me anyway. So there are really positive aspects, and there's some challenges I think associated with that. And so I think as far as where we're headed, I do think there's a place still for online conferences and workshops and that sort of thing. Or hybrid options, right? I do think we still want face-to-face interactions with each other. But like for us at Dallas College, we have college-wide activities that everyone can attend. And I'm thinking we may want to continue to have the option for people to attend face-to-face and for people to attend virtually if they can't drive. It can take you an hour and a half to get from the south end of Dallas County to the north end, from one of our campuses to the other, given bad traffic. Well, people don't have time to do that always, right? And so that could increase participation and increase the access to people across the college if we had that option. I've been attending our Rotary luncheons in Farmers Branch. They still have the option for people to attend on Zoom, and people can be there in person. So you can sort of do either option now. So I'm thinking moving forward, I want to explore continuing to have both of those options for our folks.
Thank you. So looking back, I hope we don't think the past year has been a complete loss. I think from our panelists, we're hearing that there are some valuable lessons we've learned about teaching and learning in the 21st century, as well as how to do our jobs while we've been socially isolated. Now, while many of us are starting to feel relief as we see the light at the end of the pandemic tunnel, it might be uncomfortable to think that we might face similar challenges in the future. Just recently, a few weeks, or I guess it's been more than a few weeks ago, Texas faced some challenges around the disruptions in the teaching and learning in their colleges and in their schools. And so I want us to think about, and I'm combining two questions here, just letting my panelists know. Looking forward to when restrictions that have been implemented are lifted, what might we wish to keep? And then looking back, what are things that we learned that can help us better prepare for challenges that may arise in the future? Okay, so I think Christine, we'll let you go first, and then Linda, followed by Banaz.
Okay, well, let's see. So things to keep. I really think that keeping the idea that we can attend virtually as well as attend in person. I think that the in-person part is extremely important. That's of course my own opinion, but I found that most of my colleagues agree that being in person, there's a little bit more interaction and things there. But in terms of professional development, we do, as you said, have the virtual, and this past year in 2020, we had our what we call professional day, which is everybody. It has to attend, and so everybody is there. And it used to be just at the one campus, but now it's going to be virtual. So it could be that people don't have to travel, and some of them do travel an hour and a half to get there. So that does make sense. And the other thing that I think is that I think we're going to be meeting a lot more with our students. We'll be able to be there for our students a lot more because we'll be able to deal with issues as they come up, both online and in person. And especially if we have students who are not comfortable with coming in, we're going to have to be talking with them online, but the same thing is true with colleagues. And our professional development, therefore, really should be offered in all modalities, and hopefully that will take place. I think there has to be some infrastructure workings. There has to be some improvements there because a lot of the classrooms, a lot of the spaces don't have the capability of really projecting the whole the classroom or whatever environment that you need, the conference room or whatever, with the audio and the visual being effective. I think that it's more still, we're still more at the, you have to be in front of the camera thing. And I'm hoping that in the future that the technology will evolve enough that we'll really be able to have a much better virtual experience. Besides just online, but also so that the people in the classroom don't feel like you're restricted, or in the office feel like you're restricted, and then the people who are at home, you know, they see everything, but there's not nearly as much as what they could. So I think that's a big deal. I think conferences, and this would be actually great for conferences if you think about it. If you have presentations where the presenter is in a room with a bunch of people and there's a lot of interaction, but then there's also people online and they're interacting at the same time. So sort of like I don't want to use the word hybrid, I want to use the word blended situation. And so I think that those would be really great. But I do know that for the future, it's going to be that we're going to have meetings online. We're going to have conferences online. I think that the costs and things like that are, so we found that there's a reduced cost in offering a lot of these. And I believe that that's going to play a big part, especially for the people who don't get the funding from their colleges in order to go to conferences. I think that makes a huge difference. And so I'd see that AMATYC and NOS and all of those organizations, MAA, are going to find a way to incorporate this in the future. And also, I think that that if we prepare properly, if we actually take a look at forward and see how we can, when we're buying new things or when we're thinking about new things, when we're thinking about the OERs, when we're thinking about professional development activities for our faculty and staff in the future, I think it really is something that we have to say, okay, how can we best do this for everybody? And that would include all different modalities, all different types of accessibility. So I really think that this is something that's going to stick with us going forward. We are going to have all three modalities for teaching, of course, and I think that's going to be also true for professional development in all its different aspects. And so I'm going to boot it off.
Thanks, Christine. So I have heard from faculty who had never taught online before that there is some of this that they've learned that they will continue to use in their face-to-face classes. So I feel like that's a great step forward for us, right? To kind of take the best of both worlds. As Christine mentioned, we will definitely have, I think, more hybrid and online classes to meet student demand than what we had in the past. Not all classes are suited for that, obviously, but some can be done very well. And more of our students, I think, now are comfortable with online or hybrid. And so we want to make sure that we meet their needs as long as that class lends itself to that format. And so we expect about 70% of our classes this fall to be face-to-face. We're planning for a back to normal, although, but nobody really knows what normal is going to be now. But whatever that is, providing there are no COVID restrictions, we're expecting that will be about 70% face-to-face. So as Christine mentioned, I hope we keep some of our meetings virtual, our business, internal business meetings virtual. An example is we have 7 campus presidents and we meet once a week. And, we all know each other well enough. We don't have to worry about, oh, I can't read their body language if we're on video or anything like that. We can, interact with each other just as well virtually as we can face-to-face, in my opinion. So if you had 6 people driving to a 7th campus every week, we can save a lot of time. We can save a lot of emissions from our vehicles in terms of pollution, and so I feel like there are good reasons to keep some of our meetings virtual. I do hope that we will continue to capitalize. I think we will continue to capitalize on the use of technology to streamline processes and work in more sustainable ways. I feel like this has allowed us, it's forced us to move away from all of the paper-based, signed by hand documentation that we thought we had to have before. Well, there's this great, Adobe Sign, DocuSign, right, that are secure signatures and that kind of thing. And so I really want to see us continue to move away from all the paper-based filing cabinets that would take up like rooms of space with the filing cabinets with all the paper. And my opinion is that in higher ed, we're kind of pack rats when it comes to paperwork, and we think we might need it 20 years down the road, so we keep it all. So I think we can make some improvements there as well. And so I think that some of our bureaucratic processes really aren't necessary. I think we've discovered they really aren't necessary, and that we can safely eliminate some of the steps that we were requiring. I'm not talking about our policies, right? Policies are policies, but the processes associated with those policies can be, flexed and changed, and sometimes it's personal preference. So I do think that overall, we've learned that we have to be flexible and we have to be fast in responding to things like this. And I don't intend for us to remain in a continual state of fast that wears people out and burns people out. But now we know it's possible, right? Whereas before, we really didn't think we could do things this fast and still do them well. But as always, one thing I know for sure is that faculty are going to take care of our students, right? Regardless, come hell or high water, faculty are going to make sure that students are taken care of, even at the detriment of their own health, right? The faculty health. So we don't want to live in this perpetual state of fast, but we now know it's possible. And so I think that opens up doors to a lot of future possibilities. So Banaz, your perspective on that?
Thank you for your input. What I'm thinking is that what faculty would keep going forward are they will keep posting all their lessons and notes online for students to access them. There will be one central place to turn in assignments, and they would spend time reteaching students who are confused. And the one other thing that we will keep using is the recording class sessions, and this will become a norm and might remain so. Because students, they can use those videos to study, and even if they have attended the in-person class, they would reuse those videos for studying. And as it was alluded to by our panelists, the video conferencing has dramatically changed the way the world meets up. So that is going to, we are going to keep that. The other one is that teachers have noticed that students who do not like the spotlight, they have really blossomed with online learning, and they might continue to using online discussion forums and polls, etc., in their classes, whether face-to-face or online. The other thing is that concepts like self-paced learning and flipped classroom resonated with many educators and students alike. So going forward, some might want students to continue to watch lessons at home, and so that when they do group work and activities in the classroom. And of course, cutting down on environmental waste, we talked about that. We have gone paperless, so especially for grading assignments. So hopefully we keep it that way and save lots and lots of trees.
Thank you. So at this point, we'd like to open up the floor for questions for our panelists. Here's our contact information. So we'd like to hear from you. What are you experiencing? What questions do you have? Maybe what you see happening in the future, or ideas that you'd like the panelists to respond to. So if you'll please put that in the chat.
They're all stunned, Laura.
I know. I think you guys did a fantastic job. So while we give them a chance to maybe mull over and see, yes, ask a question or two, I just want to comment maybe from the organizational perspective. I think our panelists touched on many of the key issues. I know that in last spring when AMATYC was planning for a face-to-face conference in Spokane, and then we got caught up in the COVID pandemic. And then there was concern about, you know, as an organization, we sign contracts and issues related to the cost to the organization and how do we navigate that process. And, you know, with the leadership of Kate Kozak and the current board, we were able to navigate that and secure sponsors for our fall conference. And what we saw was there were a lot of people that attended the fall conference, which was free, that had never been able to attend an AMATYC conference before. So, you know, there was a huge potential for meeting some equity type goals by being able to do that. And within the board itself, there were some face-to-face meetings that have typically been held, but because of COVID and financial considerations, those have been moved to a virtual format. And surely, you know, the face-to-face contact and maybe some of that networking and some of that idea generation that occurs in those environments is missing. But still, we've been able to accomplish the work of the organization rather effectively. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. So Curtis is asking, how has your experience with the move online affected how you or your departments view testing? So who would like to take that on?
I could go on.
Okay.
Well, it has not made any changes in past year during COVID because I'm fully online. So I have been online for the past 15 years. So we have used ProctorU, and when COVID started, then we started using Respondus Monitor, which uses camera also. That's the name of the software. Therefore, those faculty who were teaching face-to-face and they ended up coming online, they also started using this monitor. It was not an easy transition, but because they were not allowed to go to campus, but this was something that we had to get adjusted to. There is a talk now about creating authentic assessments so that it can substitute those proctor testing using Proctoria, Respondus, or ProctorU. So, but we'll see how far it goes. It's a long process. That does not happen overnight. But this is where we are at my school.
One thing we found out is that, well, we use Respondus, either the lockdown browser or the monitor. We have tried others as well because of the limitations of Respondus. We have had some issues because the public school system here issued Chromebooks, and Chromebooks were not compatible with Respondus at all for the longest time. And what do you do when you have no access to regular computers, you know, computer stations, because what you have is a Chromebook, period, and a sentence. So that ended up being kind of an issue. And we're still looking at that going forward. We also, we're looking at things like Chegg and Bartleby's and places like that, and seeing an uptick in a lot of our assessment pieces showing up there. So we are striving to come up with different ways of assessing. Oral assessments has been one of them. So that's kind of the oral assessments, or instead of just watching people or having them on a camera because of the different needs of the students.
Yeah, I don't actually have anything else to add. We had exactly the same issue as Christine. We have a lot of dual credit students, and it was a real problem that they had the Chromebooks. So we haven't completely worked all that detail out yet, but we're hoping that the ISD, that the school systems are going to move away from Chromebook, basically, is because they're not as powerful and flexible as a regular laptop or other types of tablets, I think. So anyway, we're talking to them about that. So
Yeah.
So Laura, I don't know if you want to weigh in on, there's a couple of questions there about AMATYC.
Yeah. So yeah, Brenda raises the question about virtual. So we have the most amazing conference committee that works on planning the conferences. And so keeping in mind like the financial obligations with regards to contracts that we've signed for face-to-face conferences, they are working on what might a virtual component to the AMATYC conference actually look like. So there are plans for a virtual component to the AMATYC conference in the fall. Those details, though, have not been completely worked out. So other than just saying that, yes, that's on our radar, and that is something that we're thinking very carefully about. Yeah, we are considering it. But thank you for the question. That's a great question. And thank you, Edward, for your compliment. Let's see. Then Manisha, huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw a question about the important conversations being missed because we were remote, home, or online. Have we found successful ways to navigate these without calling a formal meeting? I mean, that's tough, I think. You know, for me, with the people I work with, we've gotten to where we are substituting a Teams call with in place of walking down to somebody's office. Like, we don't email and say, do you have time for a meeting? We just randomly call them on Teams, which is for me the equivalent of walking into their office and saying something to them. And if they don't answer, that's fine too. So, you know, that's an easy way to have one-on-one face-to-face conversations that as closely mimics, you know, going to their office to have a conversation with them as anything I've found. It's better than a phone call. For me, it's better than a text or a series of, you know, 100 emails where you're trying to clarify what you're saying. If I could just walk down to their office and have a quick conversation, that would eliminate a lot of emails. So that's something we've done. I've been kind of drug into that kicking and screaming. That was not my natural go-to, but other people have done that with me, and I really like it.
We've been doing that too. We've been using Teams and calling people. And, you know, from a teacher's perspective, you can call students from Teams without having to worry about, you know, trying to get the office number or something like that. You can just, if they'll give you a phone number, you can call it right away, and you can have that video. If they're using their smartphone, you're seeing things, you know, or their iPad, iPhone or whatever. So that actually helps.
I want to weigh in on that too. And when we suddenly had to go fully online, my division chair, she took the lead, and she started once a month. And I believe in the beginning it was once every 2 weeks, because it was just so urgent to bring everyone together. And we were having coffee and discuss meetings. So people would just come on board. It was on a Friday morning, and you can just ask any kind of question that your heart is. And then my chair and her assistant, they will go about and look for the solutions. And many of them, they had a lot of questions about how to deal about assessments, you know, about final, about midterm, how do we proctor? Is it necessary to proctor? All these little questions. And now at the end of the year, after 1 year, everybody are experts now. And we have got repository of all these archives of all these sessions, And in fact, now at this point, our face-to-face faculty are becoming an expert. They find a little something that they have been playing around with. So they come and they actually present in these meetings. So it's really empowered our face-to-face faculty to the point that they are at par with someone who has been teaching for years. So this has been very, very successful and useful. And of course, as we move on to, to that normalcy that Linda alluded to, then probably they all will go to their own chairs, and their own chairs will be having those department meetings. But this is how, but at times that we had to have department meeting, it was only the 10 of us in the online department. Coffee and chat or discuss were for everybody, over 60 faculty that we had. It was lovely.
At CCBC, we have a tradition of having what we call open forums because the governance for us, has actually forms on the different main campuses so that they can get the input from the faculty and staff on the campuses as part of the governance process. And also to inform. So the president has always used that as a great place to inform people. And now we do that online. And instead of it being this campus holds it this day, this campus holds it this day, and they're all separate, we are now seeing everybody together and providing the input together as a session. And also our president has been doing what she calls desk side chats every Monday to update us on what's been going on and just to give a personal touch. She talks about things that are going on in her life or the things that she's heard going on in other people's lives and shares things like that, of course, with permission. And so we do get a lot of the personal stuff back. It is a nice distraction. Sometimes we get videos that faculty have made or students have done that we see, or just something just to break up the monotony and to sort of bring a relief, a rest from the seriousness of everything else. So I think that's pretty cool.
So I think this last comment / question is a good one to kind of end our webinar on. So Manisha says there was a lot of faculty burnout during the pandemic, particularly fall of 2020. And yes, I can echo that. That was probably the roughest semester of my life. Going forward, it would be useful to have a live community event where we connect with each other. For instance, the end of AMATYC sessions had a trivia and potentially other fun networking social events. So maybe you could share an idea or two around how we might be able to do something like this and how it would be implemented.
Well, I personally think that I think it would be really cool to have like little gatherings just like we had. If we're going to have a virtual component of the conference, then why not use that to have people sort of interact throughout the day? Because if you've got the people there at the conference and the people that are virtual, they can interact with each other. And I think that's great. But I also think that maybe we could have some sort of professional development through AMATYC and other organizations that have do have that component to them. Like maybe just have hey, AMATYC's having an AMATYC trivia night or something like that. I think it would be kind of a cool thing, and people might come to that just to have a little bit of togetherness. Bring us together, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at the conference. It could be year round.
Thank you, Christine. Any other, I know that, for example, one of the regions, and it's escaping me which region it is now, has meetup nights, which I understand are just faculty who get together to meet up and have conversation, but maybe this is something that AMATYC could explore further as an organization and see if that might be expanded beyond the region. And like I said, it's escaping me which one it is.
Well, there's
there
also, AMATYC has the book club that's really trying to do
yes,
some
talk
of that.
about that.
Oh, well, but Naz and I could both talk about that all day. But the book club is really just an attempt to get the people who are in AMATYC and some people who are outside who want to come in to talk about, to have conversations, to get together and just chat. Basically, and of course, there has to be a reason for that because everybody has to have a reason. So we have book club, and right now the book club is working on Small Teaching, the book by anyhow, the book that's really Lang. Thank you, James N. Lang. And so it's a really interesting conversation. We've already met once, and we're going to be meeting again on May 6th. I'll put in that plug. We are talking, we're having a conversation about how all of that in the book was talking about just in general, but also applies to now with the pandemic and everything else, and how we're going to move forward, what we can do to help our students moving forward. And that's just the beginning of the conversation. We're also looking forward to other books and having other conversations. So, you know, it would be great, but that is one of the socialization things. It's not a strict, you know, serious meeting. It's got some fun to it.
You know, we have a faculty group that does Fridays at 4 happy hour, and they've invited me to it from when I was serving as provost for the district. I got a permanent invite. I don't always get to go, but it's a no work zone. And they do it on Teams. And so they're constantly sharing links with each other about whatever funny stuff they're talking about, or I don't know. So I get their messages on Teams, you know how it pops up even if you're not in the meeting. So I see, and they've been going at it for, I don't know, they started it probably way back in, I don't know, July, and they've been doing it consistently every Friday. So, and it's faculty initiated across the whole college, all the campuses.
That's a great suggestion.
We also have faculty meetups. This is AMATYC professional development. Those faculty meetups, again, those are casual talks that we have. We talked about emotions, faculty burnout, you know, so we are always looking, I am always looking for ideas. In fact, we have another one. Those are usually once every quarter, because we don't want to compete with other webinars that are going on. So we have to watch the calendar. Those are great avenue, great venue for us to talk casually. You don't even have to have read anything, studied anything, just turn up and share your viewpoint. And it has been a great session, very successful sessions we had. So stay tuned for the upcoming one during the first week of June.
Perfect. Well, we want to be mindful of your time. So we do want to thank McGraw-Hill Higher Education, as they are the proud sponsor and support of our webinar series. And just to give you a heads up, the planning, as this was brought to you by the National Math Summit, we want to thank our planning leadership team, as well as the steering committee, for putting together the National Math Summit, which is June 14th and 15th. It will be held at 1 p.m. on the 14th and features Jenna Carpenter as the keynote speaker, and there will be some concurrent sessions, and it concludes on the 15th at 5 p.m. It's a pre-conference to the NOS 2021 conference and requires a separate registration. So regarding webinars that are leading up to the summit, there was this webinar in April. There's one more webinar in May on transformational practices to incorporate active learning in the mathematics courses. So put that on your radar and consider attending that webinar. The webinar series will then resume after the National Math Summit. And so stay tuned for additional details coming from AMATYC. And we want to thank you for your attendance here today and wish you a very pleasant rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.